I want to tell you all something that I think you already know, and that is world-class athletes have a unique perspective, a platform to reach the large audiences that will be watching, especially as they'll be doing here from Lake Placid. And many of the athletes we know choose to use their leverage for making change and for calling for action. So let's do this. Let's take a quick look at a short film called Beyond Sports.
Do and how we operate that will save the planet. We better pay attention to that. I'm telling you, we got 10 years. If we don't fix this in 10 years, it's over. We have to make that our #1 commitment, the Earth and our preservation of Earth, so that we operate in a very sustainable green way.
How about that? So at this time, I'm proud to introduce 3 athletes. When I call your names, just come on up. Please welcome Chris Dickerson, Susan Dunkley, and Philip Marquis. Oh, come on, we can do better than that. Hey, there we go. Morning. How are you? So as a high school and professional baseball player, Chris understands what dedication, hard work, and drive means on and off the field. After a Major League Baseball career spanning 8 seasons with the Cincinnati Reds, I'll give you a mic in just a second. Cincinnati Reds, the New York Yankees, Baltimore Orioles, and Cleveland Indians. Chris went on to co-found the Players for the Planet. Susan Dunkley attended Dartmouth College, where she studied ecology and earned her NCAA All-American honors as a part of the ski team. And upon graduation, she learned how to shoot and joined the women's biathlon national team. 3 Olympics, 2-time world championship silver medalist, and she has done so many other important things as well. And then we have, excuse me one second, Vincent. I'm skipping forward because I'm trying to get us back on time here. Sorry, one second. Yes, how about if we just let you introduce yourselves? Is that okay, guys? We'll turn this over to you and you can have the mic. You got it, guys? Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. Philippe Marquis, I'm a French-Canadian mogul skier, 2-time Olympian, also part of the Protect Our Winter Athlete Ambassador Alliance and Eco Athletes and Canadian Olympic Committee Athlete Commission. So those are all different spaces I kind of play and work in, and now I coach with the Canadian freestyle team. It is an honor for me to be down here in Lake Placid, as I actually podiumed my first World Cup here many years ago, and qualified for the Olympics when I was here as well. So it's a very iconic and special place for me to be back a few years ago. Although it was one of the first time that on January 12 it was pouring rain and not sub-zero weather.
And as you mentioned, I'm Susan Dunkley. I competed in biathlon. I recently retired this March, but Lake Placid is a special place for myself too. My father was a cross-country skier and he competed here back in 1980. So I grew up having a family connection to this place and skiing in my backyard as a kid, just in the field out in the big snowy powder in my backyard in northern Vermont. I spent a couple years here after college learning how to shoot and living at the Olympic Training Center. And now I have been living in Craftsbury as part of the Green Racing Project, which is a group of athletes committed to ecological sustainability, promoting lifelong sport, promoting sustainability in our communities.
All right, I got my solo mic, hello, there we go. Again, Chris Dickerson, former Major League outfielder. I co-founded Players for the Planet in 2008 as a rookie. It was an organization I started just to cut down on the amount of plastic that we were seeing in professional clubhouses, in particular through the use of reusable water bottles. And it was something just growing up in Southern California, in Los Angeles, where we are, more than aware of the myriad of environmental issues that that plague Southern California and just California in general, from whether it be habitat loss, ocean, river pollution, poor air quality, discrepancies with environmental discrepancies with the urban and low income neighborhoods, and so seeing a lot of these things growing up, and especially when you're young and impressionable and understanding, these amazing animals that we love in California and how they're endangered, and just understanding the impact that we have as humans and what we can do about it. And so it was through a really weird series of events, just between reading and doing some research, that I decided that I wanted to attack plastic in professional sports, and that just kind of put me on the path to see, how I could make the most impact as a professional athlete. And it was soon after that I got called up to the major leagues, and thought that I saw the response from the fans, and thought that there could be more of an opportunity if there were more like-minded athletes to continue to push the message. And so, starting with just 10 of us, it grew to 15 to 20 to 3 sports, 5 sports, and now we have, it's 2022, we have 250 plus athletes from across the globe, ranging from 5 different sports, 6, and it's exciting. But most importantly, I mentioned this to you guys earlier, talking, 10 years ago, how difficult it was to start the conversation, but also the power that we have as winter sport athletes and traditional sports athletes can come together and talk about these issues, not just what's plaguing us in the urban communities, but how tangible it is for winter sports like you guys, because you guys see it every single day. And I feel like it's the sensitivity that you guys have to it is much more adept than what we would experience in, football, baseball, basketball. So I think that's why this is going to be a great conversation, because with this particular crowd, I think, we're all in agree that we're, in serious danger here. And so, using our platforms as a collective is going to be the most important thing that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Chris, one of the really important things that we need to be able to do is to connect with other people and to work together. I think Bill mentioned last night the importance of not trying to solve problems alone, but really finding allies and advocates from a lot of different platforms. And Aaron talked about that in his talk too. So it's really helpful and interesting for us. I mean, Phil and I have come from winter sport, where we see winter sport's kind of like a canary in the coal mine. This picture behind me is a picture from Hochfilzen, Austria. This is in the heart of the Alps in December. And it's becoming more and more common where we have green fields and white ribbons of snow that we're skiing on. And so we're seeing the impact of climate change, and to hear about the impact of, you were telling us a few minutes ago outside, the lack of trees in the neighborhoods around the big stadiums where you would compete, and how that impacts the different communities. And just getting more and more people on board and knowing about these issues and sharing, using your athlete voice and platform to address these is so important.
And from my perspective, like I get asked quite often, like what's the place of sport in this climate change fight here that we're all kind of part of. And many years ago, when I started on the national team, when I started traveling the world, I did notice as well, like being from a winter sport, I did notice glacier changing and our seasons kind of just changing a little bit, overlapping and getting pushed. And we were used to go to places where we couldn't go anymore. Yeah, I think it's just that realization is starting to sink in more and more. And as I grew up, sport became a bit more than just performance and medals. And I definitely wanted to be involved and do my part as well and influence. So on top of being a billion-dollar industry, sport has a lot of power because it creates great role model. It's part of our daily life. We're all kind of, we go to live events, we tune on the TV, and I think we all get involved in this industry from a professional standpoint, but also regionally, locally in our daily activities. So for me, like getting involved in that space, I had no knowledge, no nothing a couple of years ago, and I just kind of surrounded me with organization that had a bit more background and were organized and gave me the tools, the resources where I could actually educate myself and find my voice. So that's how it kind of started for me. And in all honesty, I just got approached and influenced by a role model of mine, someone that was a professional skier that I looked up all my life, was a pioneers in my field, and we were riding the chairlift up in Whistler Blackcomb, where that glacier is really on survival mode right now, and we're definitely counting the years to be able to do summer skiing up there. And he looked at me and like, would you like to join Protect Our Winter Canada, because we need some French-speaking ambassador and you'd be a great fit for us. And other than witnessing some of the impact of climate change in our activities in my sport, it was just kind of this influence of someone that I really looked up as an athlete. And I think this is the place, this is the voice that the athletes can play in that space. And I'm proud now to be involved in. And some of the younger athletes come to me now and as a reference, which I don't know if they should, but they definitely come more to me and ask me how I got involved and what do I do on a day-to-day on day-to-day action and stuff like that. So I think it is fun to see the advocacy and then the athlete voice rising. It is fun to see that. It is great to see that we're not having the debate about is it real or is it really happening? Are we part of that? I think this conversation has been done for the most part a couple of years ago, and now we're just kind of ramping up the people behind this movement right now, which I think is bring me a lot of optimism looking forward. And with talks like Aaron had and Bill last night, with definitely a lot more expertise than some athletes bring, but it definitely brings a fresh sense of direction that we don't know if we're going to win that fight, but as athletes we're certainly fighters, and we've been underdogs in our lives, and I think that's where we can create good stories about this movement. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, so talking about whether it's it was a phenomenon, like just a random phenomenon 10 years ago, and before our video, Tim Lewicki, who is founder and CEO of Oak Group, which is probably has basically set the benchmark for stadiums and venues and the sustainability space with Climate Pledge Arena, and he says we have 10 years, and I don't necessarily agree with him, because when I spoke at the UN, I was fortunate enough to speak at the UN in 2009, just after my rookie year. And I got to talk, speak with guys like with Sean White and some of these other world-class athletes from a number of different sports. And that was the first eye-opening experience. But that time they were talking about the 350, the 350 project, 350.org, which was trying to maintain the 350, parts per million with carbon. And we've, obviously we've absolutely smashed that. And so that 350, we're supposed to maintain staying under 400 10 years ago, and here we are like that. He's talking about another 10 years when that essentially was that 10 years of action, and we didn't do anything about it. You had these athletes who are already noticing, like every time they would go back to do back mountain skiing, that it would start melting sooner, and then snowing later, or the snowpack was less, or they're experiencing drought within their home country, and deep sea, deep water divers were knowing that the water's getting warmer, And we had this French rower who basically stumbled upon the Atlantic garbage patch by accident. She was trying to set a world record, and she noticed something off in the path, and this glimmering color, and she thought it was incredibly peculiar at this particular location, that she changed her course. And each one of these pieces she knows was a different piece of plastic that was sitting at the top until she basically was in the middle of the Atlantic garbage patch. And it's like these stories, like we spend so much time training, so much time in these conditions at trying to reach this elite level, so many hours, and the knowledge and in which we have the conditions, we're so adept to the minute changes in conditions, that we are the perfect spokespeople for what's happening right now, because it's when you train for 5 months, you are on an internal clock that you should be you should be skiing this mountain just like you have done the last 20 years. And now all of this is being turned on its head to where you're going in, the beginning of November, and there's nothing there, and you're having to push back a month to when your your elite ski season starts in X, but you haven't been able to train in your home mountain. Like, these are the types of things that are starting to be the most prevalent stories. And for us, as particularly more of these athletes come on board, they all have individual stories, which is the most exciting thing for me. Struggling from 2009, trying to convince people that this is something that they can do, and we're like, oh, well, I don't know, like, I like the planet, but now it's like these kids are like, hey, why are you why are you interested in becoming a player for the planet? And it's like, and it's a novel, and it's, I did this, and my dad taught, my dad and I did, grew up in the back mountains, and just understanding that the level of knowledge is so far what, I'd ever imagine, coming from, these athletes. But it's also interesting to see these guys who have played 10, 15 years in the major leagues and in the NFL, and understand like how difficult it was to talk to them 10 years, but now they have kids. And it's a little bit scary understanding that they know that we're in such a bad place that they're like, okay, now I get it, as opposed to 10 years ago. It took that 10 years to be like, holy shit, yeah, my bad. I really need to, if I can do anything to protect this for my kids. So it's been a really weird period for me, like the last 3 years, is because of the conversation has started. And I feel like guys are just understanding, they're like, oh my God, I have to preserve this for my kids. And it's taken these guys to have kids in order to understand the importance of preserving our natural environment. So, but again, the fact that they're stepping up and we're able to do these programs, like our Play for Trees program that we started in 2021, it was, and Aaron will respect this, this was something that our players wanted to address, is, the lack of beautification, urban tree canopy, and how with rising climate, it's affecting, low income communities of color the most. And again, we see this being an athlete and playing in Baltimore, playing in DC, playing in Houston, when we have these heat waves and these record numbers of deaths and illnesses that are popping up, they're all located in communities of color. And that, and then, starting these conversations, we now understand that it's because that they don't have the money to keep their air conditioning on. They have to preserve it. So it's likely these elderly people that are trying to conserve money that are most exposed to these heat wave changes. So having these programs where athletes can contribute their on-field stats to the planting of trees and how they've really wanted to get out into the community, whether it's in Oakland or Houston or St. Louis, and understanding just the exchange and knowledge that we have with athletes now, but how we're using the platform of sports in itself to understand the larger problem of what we're doing and the influence that sports organizations can have in going into Milwaukee and planting 20 fruit trees and providing access to fruit, reducing urban heat, tree canopy, beautification, and how more affluent areas just so happen to have more tree cover. And so all these different, these small, minute things that really have gone under the radar for so long, sports and our athletes are really bringing more light to it, to where now we can, more guys are coming on board, and we're able to do more projects with some really great partners on the ground.
Yeah, I think it's so important too, to just thinking about how people don't respond to numbers when it comes to climate change. People don't respond to stats. As sad as it is, they respond to something that's real, and that's where athletes really have a way to be able to tell a story and to share a story, and being able to see a change in the trees and neighborhoods. It's something that I feel like your teammates can all, or teammates, people in the league, people that you interact with, can all get behind something like that.
Yeah, I definitely have to disagree with, because baseball, all they care, like stats is the big, but yeah, let's not talk about stats. That stats don't, because if there are no baseball people in here, just know that stats is a second language in baseball, and like nothing excites baseball fans more than stats. So I've often, part of my team, my One Tree Plan team is here, and so it's often so important for us to convey changes through stats in a sports perspective, because planting 130 trees, it's like, okay, well, 130 trees, well, what does that look like? Okay, well, let's overlay this on a map to a stadium that you can relate to. What if it's in the Rose Bowl? If it's at, Juventus, it'd be like, it's 15 of Juventus stadiums. It's 5 Rose Bowls. It's half of Manhattan. And so having these stats, or, it'd be the equivalent to, like the big, 5 of the biggest superstars. And so people are like, oh my gosh, wow, that's amazing. And it all has to do with stats and like what it looks like in the sports landscape.
Yeah. I mean, I guess where I'm going with that was more like the science stats about climate change. And we've talked about how in the past 10 years there has been a shift. There have been a lot more people who are tuning in, and a lot less climate deniers. And when I look at the science stats of what we have, X number of tons of carbon, or parts per million in the atmosphere, it's just like, oh, that's some number that people don't get. But when you put a visual, like you said, when you make those stats into a picture of like what it looks like in a stadium, it really moves the needle a little bit. And like a picture like this, to me, is so much more, it just grabs people in such a bigger way, and it gets their attention. I think coming back to why athletes have such a powerful voice as advocates is because we have these stories, these pictures, these stories that can move people, and that piece is so important. One thing I wanted to talk a little bit about too is just the fact that it's a little bit scary to put yourself out there as an advocate for anything. As an athlete, you pour all your energy into focusing on performance. You want to eat well, you want to recover well, you want to get your training hours in, you want to be ready and not thinking about distracting things when you're on the starting line. And a lot of people will say, as an athlete, you shouldn't be in politics, you shouldn't be in advocacy, you should just play the game, do the race, whatever it is. But the more time we spend in a place like this, the more it becomes very clear to me that the world is a lot bigger than our sport, and we need to be doing something, and it's you don't have to be perfect to start being an advocate. And I think that's a big thing that held me back for many years. I'm sure both of you have flown all over the place to compete. And it's that part would crush me a little bit, because I think about what my carbon footprint was to be a ski racer, to be a biathlete. I was flying all over the world, and that carbon, I'm just like, I can't, I'm gonna be such a hypocrite if I even open my mouth about this issue. But if you think about it, one individual's actions are not the problem here. We have a whole, whatever I'm doing climate-wise is like the tiniest and tiniest of drops of like the whole ocean of issues that we have. And that I shouldn't wait until my life is perfect before I start opening my mouth and start trying to talk. And I don't have all the answers. I think Bill mentioned last night that this is not an individual thing that we need to solve individually. We need to connect with other people. We need to get our teammates on board. We need to get our other leagues on board. We need to get, everybody kind of working on the issue. So start somewhere and do what you can with what you got.
Yeah, I see myself in those words so well. Like definitely, as a young athlete, coming from a good background without being really affected by climate change in Quebec City, I didn't feel at the beginning that it was my fight. But then, yeah, it just becomes real, and it starts. You can't wait. Yeah, you can't wait to be perfect to start that movement. You can't wait to be perfect to talk about it with your friend, with your community, with your sport leader, with your organization around you. And I think there's just so much influence that we get from our role model, whether they come from sport background or art or musician or whatever it is. It's just, we have that power to influence groups around us. We have that power to definitely pave the way here. And that's what, at the end of the day, really motivate, I think, us to do what we do and to be up here and talk about it. There will be some doubts and some anxiety along the way, and I think we all kind of see that. And at the end of the day, I definitely see that right now. Everyone participate in all sport. It's not one sport, one community that has kind of taken that path. But now I think I see the people are getting organized a lot better. The athletes getting organized a lot better. There's a lot more non-for-profit, tackling this fight, being involved, participating. So this is a highly powerful time to be taking on that fight. Whatever level of athleticism you've reached and whatever sport you're doing, whether it's professional, amateur, or it's just kind of locally with your family, I think it's extremely exciting to think about it as an opportunity to turn sport and sport industry a bit greener and talk about it because there is certainly a lot of power in numbers, and by getting all organized together and kind of getting in that same kind of wave, that same movement together. And that's how we're going to influence our leaders and to take on and shift the culture as well. I think we're all influenced so much by athletes, whatever their background is. I think if I talk about Michael Jordan, we think about the Air Jordan, and we think about what he's accomplished on and off the field, right? So there is the kind of like those kind of icon all over the place in the sport industry, but there's also like the local icon, like people that comes from the Quebec City, the Lake Placid, and that all have a really profound impact on their community. So there's no too small, and I see right now there's just a common battle that we're all kind of embarking on, a journey that we know is, it's very scary. It's there's definitely the fear of failure that we all experience as athletes all the time. I think we certainly live that on a day-to-day basis, but there's also the joy and the immense inspiration that we can maybe do this biggest humanity comeback story, and it starts yesterday, it starts now, and it kind of push further in the future by people like athletes and all of you guys in the crowd here.
I'd be curious, what are you doing next with your organization? You've done trees, you've done plastic bottles, like just getting ideas for.
Yeah, I think I've largely left it to our athletes that have come on board is to understand what they want to do, and I give them full access to exactly what they care about, because at one point it became that there were so many athletes getting on board that I had to basically like send out a form to understand like what their background was, why they want to get on board, but breaking each individual down into what we call a focus, and it can be either sustainable technologies, conservation, oceans, food sorting or food systems, which is a lot of our NWSL soccer players are plant-based and vegan. So understanding like there are so many different things that they're so passionate about, and how can we partner with their team, organization, or league to push more messaging, but also just the physical activations that we can get them out and, with youth groups, to inspire those, generations. Because I personally don't believe in just having our athletes talk. I make it a point to, if somebody comes on board, like I'm going to look for every opportunity to get them out inspire, to physically inspire and to show that they're putting in the work. Like I want our players out there getting their hands dirty, like planting trees before, literally before games, or using their free time to put 150, 200 trees in the ground. And so that was part of the reason like we're here and we're looking to do 200,000, 250,000 trees is because you have these athletes. It's not just about the general fan, it's become the influence that they're having on each other as teammates that spend 8 months out of the year, like as family members, and understanding the work and the passion that they're putting into trying to preserve something that we hold dear to us, that we get paid, so much money, but we've also dedicated thousands of countless of hours, doing this. And if we can't figure out a way to preserve it, then, all of this is it's for nothing. And Aaron said it literally within his first 3 minutes of the speech. It's like if we're potentially looking at losing an entire sport within 25 years. Like that doesn't give you chills, then I don't know what is. Like our most beloved winter sport events, could potentially be, a thing of the past in 30 years if we can't figure this out. So, I leave it up to our athletes, if they want to do, if it's waste sorting or composting or soil quality, how are we partnering with some of these groups within, these urban neighborhoods in Chicago and addressing food deserts? How are we, can we plant 20 trees here? Can we do, how much plastic can we, pick up? But how are we sending our young kids and young Dominican players and academy kids back to the complex with more of an understanding, but not just say, hey, you need to do better. How are we partnering with organizations and sponsors to provide them the tools with reusable water bottles, refill stations, education, virtual programs, in-person education programs? Why can't we take 3 or 4 athletes out and understand the things that we're not talking about, like apparel waste and how that's being sent to African countries, and urban neighborhoods, just simply put in an incinerator, and how that's continued to manifest, in these health disparities because of this waste that these large companies simply don't choose to ignore. And so you're talking about stressing over your own carbon footprint, and we go around with Coke and Pepsi, in these stadiums, and nobody's stepping up and saying, like, those are the biggest polluters, the biggest emitters of CO2 and pollutants, and yet they're the biggest, they're some of the biggest supporters and biggest pushers of, corporate sponsorship in professional sports. And we have every opportunity to shut that down. If we can collect, you're not getting on the front of the jersey. You're not getting on the side of the ski suit. These international sports federations, you're not going to be the sponsor unless you start being more responsible, unless you start putting our stuff in biodegradable packaging. We're not going to do it. And it's amazing to hear that from around the world. Brazil, the Dutch English national team, like Nike, you can't keep sending us this stuff in boxes and plastic. Like, we're just going to have to find a better solution if we're gonna figure this out, because they have the power. They're gonna pay $50-60 million to be these national sponsors, but we can't allow them to do so if they can't make a change to be more responsible and to basically create systems of change and sustainability and circularity. And sports has the power to do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was on a call with Equal Athletes a few months ago, and we were talking about textiles in sport and how, we really have this bargaining power as teams where we could really push a lot of the clothing sponsors for all the major big sports teams to think more sustainably. And you don't necessarily need a new jersey for every meet. How do we get the hands of the clothes that we're not using anymore into the hands of people who need it? And in the background of that call, I had just gotten my bag shipped from the Beijing Olympics, and we had 3 duffel bags full of Olympic logoed gear, which is, it's pretty fun when you're at the games, to get all this like Team USA stuff. But afterwards, like, what happens to that gear? Like, how much of it is actually used on a regular basis? And like, how do we think about more strategically, like, what do we actually need? And are we using more stuff than we need? When something's given to us free, are we just taking it? Or are we actually intentionally thinking about like what do we need? And how do we get the companies that we partner with, the sponsors that help, work with our teams on board with this way of thinking, so we're not putting in waste where we don't need something.
Yeah, those, I've traded a lot of my clothes for fundraising, which is a good way if you want to get rid of some of that. I don't know, I'm just like trying to look at time here and see if we should take a few questions.
Yeah. Oh, you have one? Okay. So if you could raise your hand if you have a question there in the back of the room.
I'll come to you next.
Thank you very much. Hi, guys and girls. Martin from Australia. Sorry. Congratulations on your confidence and your resilience and your stubbornness. I think it's an inspiration to many, and I hope that there'll be some great lessons learned from people watching this both online and in the future. I've actually got a question for you. You're very confident, you've got a lot of understanding, but yesterday or the day before, there was a Premier League team in the UK that decided to take a charter flight that took an hour rather than go by bus for 3 hours. So they are a Premier League sustainable club, but the coach decided to do that for a whole raft of reasons. Now, a lot of the players in that were quite uncomfortable. If that happened to you, what would you do?
They took a chartered flight instead of taking the bus.
Normally they take the bus, but this time they decided to take a charter flight, so their carbon footprint went from 0 to, well, you know. So if you
You said in particular it was a 1 hour flight versus a 3 hour bus ride.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's like, it's one of those things, it's ridiculous, but what she said, it'd probably be annoying, but it's so insignificant if we talk about like some of the larger things. If we look at like flights, like your footprint with flights, as opposed to say the top 1% of polluters in companies, it's minuscule, and I don't think that it's not that it's okay, but I think once we start this conversation, we get more information of verified carbon credits and how we can offset some of these things, and knowing that is, when we have that opportunity to put something back from doing something stupid like taking an hour flight, I wouldn't stress on it that much, because I think like some of these Premier League teams like Southampton and like Burnley, like they're doing extraordinary things, at their complex. And so if it's something that, it might have been that it's just like, tough training or whatever, it's like, I don't want these guys like stretch out on the bus. I don't know all the details, but a 1 hour flight, I'd probably just, let that slide. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, but I'm also coming from baseball, where I don't think there's another sport on the planet that emits more. Honestly, we have 30 teams. We play 162 games. If you're on the road for 82 days, and if you look at the logistics of an MLB season, it's pretty wild. Especially now that we just opened interleague play, and we're going to have more teams crossing the country. It's for a whole separate conversation, something that I've discussed with MLB and how that can be changed. But if you're talking to Premier League, who's, let's be honest, they don't fly anyways. So one flight's not going to kill them. They're incredible about taking buses, about taking trains. One chartered flight's not going to kill them. If you're going to point any finger, it'd probably be at Major League Baseball.
I've really enjoyed what each of you have said, and Chris, specifically, your conversation, and Susan, you're pointing out that images and association, here to an athlete or a sport and the conditions is what's motivating more athletes to get more and more involved. And there's a communications model called head, heart, and hands. And it's grabbing the heart, then the stats, and the back story. And then how to get behavior change, how to get people to act on that. And I'm wondering what each of you in the organizations you're affiliated with are doing in terms of reaching more connecting more, and motivating that change in behavior overall in people's lives, athletes' lives, and young people following in sports, their lives?
Yeah, I think what I was saying earlier about having a tangible an effort rather than no offense to eco athletes and what Lou does. Lou's great because he's great about educating. The language of climate and climate action, but we're about using the celebrity to create that change to where, because it's great, nobody cares about athletes just saying, oh yeah, save the planet. Nobody cares about that. Like we're not about that. I need athletes that look like me. Okay. Yeah. People of color, we need more athletes, people of color getting out into those communities. That's how you inspire. And so I think that's one of the coolest things about, what we do at Play for Trees. Like players have the option, to plant trees in Honduras or plant trees in, remote places, in Canada or whatever, but that's not what personally moves the needle. It's getting 4 or 5 players to come out and being with these youth kids to see them planting trees, and not only having that just to say it, but they have the opportunity to sit there and learn about why this root system is important, how it increases soil integrity, how it can, grow food, and like how you can feed your family for the next 30 years because of what these doing. It's about those one-on-one opportunities that you have to exchange information, and that is what they can take home immediately and start that behavioral change, because you're giving them the tools to grow their own food just down the street. You're giving them the tools, the reusable water bottles, so they're not using plastic, and so that you're lightening their footprint significantly by saving them 2,000 single-use plastics. So it's about getting out to the community, engaging and having partners that can provide them the tools to where they can constantly go back and create that behavioral change. They can go to school with a backpack, but they can also, as engineers, they can understand like, hey, let's take 5 youth groups and go to Climate Pledge and learn about sustainable architecture and talk about science, and if that is a particular interest, and give them something to hope, show them how it's done and where to go, and give them the resources. That's how you move the needle ultimately, rather than just posting one thing on Instagram.
Yeah, I guess I'd say that like Instagram posts and such only go so far, but I think just looking at the people who you have in your own little circle and starting discussions. I think about climate change. I don't remember who came up with this way of thinking, but as like a ripple. It's like, here's my little place, my little plunk in the pond. You can imagine a raindrop falling. And then can I make the ripples around me just go out a little bit so then they're affecting the ripples around them? Right now I work as a running director at a sports center in Vermont at the Craftsbury Outdoor Center, and we have running camps all summer long. So one of the small little changes we made this year that I thought was kind of fun, and it got some discussion going, was instead of giving out traditional t-shirts, which is what these camps have given out for years, we gave out socks, because socks are more likely to be used and worn out than a cotton t-shirt is. And when we gave people their socks, having them sign a swag pledge, which was swear to wear again and again, and talking a little bit about the actual cost and the footprint of a pair of socks. And then when they actually sign their name, for me, I mean, the idea is to have people go home and have that kind of in their mind and think about that the next time they go to get an item of clothing or something, and just small things add up, We're not going to be perfect, and it's hard to be perfect, but you do have to start and make the small little pieces start to build. So.
I'll add one just quick experience of mine with Protect Our Winter, and I thought it was a powerful one, but with Protect Our Winter, we had this campaign at some point. It was in 2019, Vote for Climate. And Bill touched on it yesterday. Like, older people have a tendency to vote at all costs, but it's really hard to get young generation and new voters in Canada when they're above 18 to go and put on their check mark, right? So In 2019, what we did is we went through schools, and we actually started, that campaign started before that, but we went through school, and we went to high school specifically, so we knew that generation is the next generation of voters. So, and we had moving presentation about climate change and how it affected our life. And we were a bunch of athletes on the Athletes Alliance, kind of going through across Canada, different sector and different places. And I thought it was really powerful, because you have those conversations with youth, with high school student, high school, maybe athletes or not, but people that see you as someone who's had success in sport, and they relate to you because of your outdoor passion. You talk about your experience, you show photo, they've seen you on TV, and I think it creates a really interesting connection with those people. And I thought that was really powerful, and that influence kind of like how we're going to influence the government level of things. And I think this is going to be really important in the next couple of years and the next decades here, how, like, who we put in charge, who are going to be our leaders of tomorrow. And it started by the vote. So I thought that was just a really concrete example of how I was involved in how Protect Our Winter in Canada. We kind of tackled that with a campaign that was vote for climate, vote for nature, I think, if I remember the hashtag. But yeah, so I think that going at the youth and sharing stories, the impact of, again, athletes in the community, and being all like kind of, it's just a sensible accord when you talk about or passionate about nature, or passionate about outdoor and the place we live in. And yeah, I mean, there's this introduction that Bill brought up, or started his presentation yesterday about Lake Placid and the rain transforming into flakes and all. It's pure. It's kind of like it really hits you right here when you talk about outdoor and the climate and the place we live on. So when you were able to get that connection with the youth, I think it's a great starting point.
Well, first and foremost, again, thank you for this wonderful, wonderful intersectional conversation. It's just a blessing to have you here, leveraging the platform. This is exactly, I think, what FISE is about. One of the things I heard some of the folks, I won't say what company it was, talking about what's the follow-on after this? And then you saw the picture of my daughters back in '93 when they had a youth program. You know, kids are not looking for something to do, they're looking for something to be. And what powerful signal that you're sending right now to being a climate activist and leveraging the sport. So I want to say I applaud you, and I think that that's important. I'm not going to, I hope Joe Martens isn't going to get me, because he's got Orta and Hydrica back there looking for the next act. I'm just saying that there's a foundation and a synergy that I hope you do follow up on. What's next? How do we build this movement and go forward? Secondary piece is a big comment, you know, and it's about how often anti-climate folks use carbon footprint as a weapon. You know, you're flying on a plane, you're flying on a train. You know, I travel globally, but I use commercial flights. So they are already going. That carbon footprint is already there. It's not mine. It's just what the industry is. And I know that most athletes use the existing infrastructure. So don't beat yourself up about an existing infrastructure as if that's a gotcha. In the case of a climate portfolio of an institution like baseball, you know, most of your flights are chartered, but they've been doing that for the past 70 years. So the issue is how you're framing a response. It's not apologizing, and it absolutely challenged the industry to reduce its carbon footprint. But the advocacy end is that, look, whenever possible, if ever possible, always use mass transit, always use existing, do not charter new flights for your special place. That's what's going to really seriously reduce carbon footprint. But absolutely greening the, you know, the as I say, the transportation sector by, as I say, encouraging mass transit and clean mass transit is really critical. So I really applaud the work that you folks are doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Questions? Right there? Okay.
I really appreciate the work that you do, and it makes me think about kinds of things that I try to do in the community. I really want things to happen in the communities that are really believe in self-determination, getting the people in the communities to identify the issues So I really believe in self-determination, getting the people in the communities to recognize the issues in their communities and helping them understand how they have the power to change those things. And when a celebrity pops up in the community and says, I care, and these are the issues that you have a concern about, and I can help you move this along, that means a lot. And so I really care about what you're doing. The other thing is the citizen science piece. Lately, the things that I've been doing in the community, when I get the people in the community really engaged in testing their water, or just, we did a GIS project where we had kids learn how to use the geographic information system and identify environmental issues in their community. I mean, that was so empowering. Some of those kids, when they went to college, they ended up studying GIS and learning how to do mapping. And so, I mean, it would be really great if you find other ways to incorporate citizen science, because it will, I mean, it's amazing how, I had, last summer, I got a group, a group of people, and we went out and we tested streams for macroinvertebrates. That helps you determine how healthy a stream is or isn't. And so we had a 4-year-old and we had a 79-year-old. That was the range. And the 4-year-old was so engaged. And the people who were, you know, the older people were, when are you going to do this again? I had no idea that the stream turned out to not be a healthy stream. And he said, this is so close to my house. I had no idea. I want to learn more about my community. So I encourage you to incorporate some citizen science, to be in the communities. You know, the way I'm able to bring people up into the Adirondacks, I start in their communities. I help them understand. You see that guy changing his oil and it's going into the sewer? Well, that's our source of drinking water for our community. You know, when your garbage does not magically disappear when the garbage man comes and takes it away. So, you know, there's a landfill and it's finite. So these are some of the things that I really try to get people to understand in their community. And then when I start to tell them about the Adirondacks, they can connect more, and then I can get them up here to see the world is a lot bigger, and there's more that we could be doing. And yes, let's start in your backyard, and then you get to understand this more globally.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you all for the questions, and it's been a tremendous panel. And before we move, every now and then as a professional communicator, you make a mistake and you need to fix it. So I owe you a big pardon, Philippe Marquis, and I want everybody to know, I didn't introduce you properly, that Philippe became the second member of his family to compete at the Olympic Winter Games. You followed in the footsteps of your brother, Vincent. You stood on 3 World Cup podiums from 2016 to 2017. That brought your career total to 12, is that right? And that includes a bronze medal at the Pyeongchang 2018 test event. Now you have been properly introduced. Thank you all, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.